Hello, I'm Catherine Harlow. I'm the Head of Transfer Pricing at the RELX Group. So we at RELX really welcomed the publication of the BEPS papers in October 2015. For transfer pricing and other aspects of BEPS, we were really involved in the consultation process, which lasted around 2 years. We wrote representations in response to all of the consultation papers on transfer pricing, and we attended the public consultations in Paris at the OECD on Chapter 1 of the Transfer Pricing Guidelines, low value-added services, cost contribution agreements and hard-to-value intangibles. We're delighted that the arm's length principle is preserved with no special measures, and we have taken action in a number of areas during the course of the OECD BEPS project. We've had a programme of transfer pricing documentation in place since 2012, and annually we complete around 80 transfer pricing reports in-house. Our reports have always followed the arm's length principle. However, as a result of the OECD guidance on transfer pricing documentation, we've overhauled our transfer pricing documentation report templates to ensure that they are OECD compliant and that they also follow Annex 2 to Chapter 5 of the OECD guidelines on documentation. Likewise, we're putting together master files for each division based on the guidance in Annex 1. I would recommend that other companies do act proactively to get their transfer pricing documentation to be OECD compliant rather than wait for the tax authorities to ask questions. Although there's more work to be done by the OECD on intangibles in 2016, we really welcome the guidance provided by the OECD in relation to compensating group companies for intellectual property, depending on DEMP, development, enhancement, maintenance, protection and exploitation. This makes a lot of sense to us. The guidance has prompted us to take a look at intellectual property around the group and what activities the owner carries out to ensure that the reward that they get is in line with their DEMP functions. We're concerned about the guidance on hard-to-value intangibles in that it allows tax authorities to use financial data after the event as evidence as to whether the pricing was arm's length. Hopefully the OECD will clarify further this point during the work that they are planning to do during 2016. We're also really concerned about the OECD guidance in relation to cost contribution arrangements. Historically, it's been really common for multinationals to share costs in relation to large development projects at cost. The RELX Group itself has a cost contribution arrangement in place, which is in fact the subject of the world's first quadrilateral advanced pricing agreement on the sharing of costs. The OECD guidance, however, states that contributions to an intangibles cost contribution arrangement should not be measured at cost, as it's unlikely to be a reliable basis for determining the relative contribution of participants. We disagree with this, and we hope that during the course of its deliberations in 2016, the OECD will take a more pragmatic view and agree that sharing costs in relation to intellectual property projects at cost can be arm's length behaviour. As a large group with a large number of recharges in relation to services, we do really welcome the simplification of transfer pricing in relation to the low value-added services. Having a markup set at 5% would really mean that RELX would not have to undertake time-consuming but straightforward benchmarking studies and provide certainty so that detailed review by the tax authorities would hopefully not be necessary. In 2016, we're going to review all of our recharges around the RELX Group so that we can decide whether to implement this policy. We're also looking forward to seeing the results of the OECD follow-up work on thresholds and other implementation issues during 2016. BEPS has put the tax authorities in a much stronger position in having access to more data about a company's transfer pricing through the country-by-country reporting and the transfer pricing local files and master files. They're also able to challenge more of the assumptions made when setting pricing and possibly use post-transaction data to analyse the decisions made pre-transaction. I really do think that APAs will become more common as a means of settling disputes so that companies have more certainty on their pricing. Certainly it's an approach that the RELX Group follow with long-running disputes on points of principle.